Hi, I'm Bill Bradley. Join me for a recent excerpt of American Voices. When I heard that Dr. Marta Tellado was recently named a senior trustee at Yale University, I knew I wanted to talk to her on American Voices so that you can hear about her great American life. Dr. Tellado, who once worked in my office, went on to become the CEO of Consumer Reports. She was also the vice president for global communications at the Ford Foundation. Her parents, who at the time didn't speak English, immigrated to the U.S. from Havana in search for a better life for their children. Dr. Tellado's here with me now. Marta, welcome to American Voices.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you were just 2 years old when your parents immigrated to the U.S. Can you tell us about your parents and your grandparents and what were their lives like in Cuba?
Well, it's quite a journey. And you're right. I came over at 2 years old. I don't remember anything, but you can imagine that that journey became dinner table conversation every evening. My parents, my father is the son of two Spaniards. We're from northwestern Spain in Lugo province, the poorest province, agricultural province in Spain. And both of them, as adolescents, left Cuba, as many people did, to work as domestics in Havana for wealthier families. And that's how they met. And my grandmother got pregnant with my dad. He's the only child. And as soon as that happened, she was shipped back to Spain. My grandfather stayed in Havana. And he didn't really come back to Havana. He lived in a farm and was a shepherd boy and came back to Havana when he was 8 years old. And that's the first time he met his dad. My mom is the daughter of two Cubans. And my grandmother is one of 14 from a farm family. I had the pleasure of meeting both of them because while they didn't come with us when we came, they did come later. And they were a real presence in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a lot from them.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
So growing up and hearing those stories of your grandparents and what they went through, how did that shape how you saw yourself in the world?
It really did. Leaving Havana was such a profound heartache for my parents. They had four children. They'd been married just about 5 years. And their dream to live in a free and open society really was what drove them to leave in a place that they truly loved. And that departure really became the opening chapter of my own story. It really shaped the person I grew up to be. They had high hopes for a revolution that did not turn out the way they'd hoped. It seemed like it replaced one dictator for another and placed a lot of severe restrictions on their freedoms and just an oppressive level of surveillance that robbed them of their dignity and their rights. And it wasn't a life they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Leaving a country like that was such a courageous act for young parents that really shaped who I was. And I couldn't appreciate as a young person that my parents' decision to leave was because of their sort of fervent beliefs in democratic values. But that was really my first lesson in courage and also just the recognition that, with each courageous act that you embrace in your life, you're also embracing all the vulnerability and the risk that comes with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People don't appreciate that.
No. And I guess it gives you a certain level of fearlessness about finding what it is, the purpose of your life, that sometimes you have to do some radical things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was such an important lesson that you have to chart your path. No one does it alone, but they sort of instilled in me a sense of going out and taking some risks because they took such huge risks for me that I wanted to make it count. And I know that's a very familiar feeling that a lot of immigrant and refugee children have, is that they're acutely aware of the sacrifices and it kind of fuels you
Mm-hmm.
You're inspired by the chances they took, and it gives you the self confidence to take some chances yourself and to be curious about the world, even if you don't understand it. And the sense that, there are things that are bigger than ourselves, and you have a
Hmm.
personal disappointment. There's a great big world out there, and it's waiting for you to make a difference. And I really, that just continued to inspire me, pretty much. And as a child of immigrants, that's what, there are other families in the neighborhood that were experiencing the same thing, and that, you just assume that's what every family's like. And then you get out in the world and you realize, oh my goodness, the thing I thought made me different is really a superpower.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, you as a kid, your parents, you arrived, your parents didn't speak English. What was it like being a child and helping your parents navigate living in the USA? I mean, even things like, grocery shopping.
That's exactly right. The life of an immigrant, a refugee. As a child, you land in a place and you instantly start absorbing everything. And I have no recollection. I just always remember being able to navigate both languages simultaneously from the get go. And that's not so easy. My parents are going to night school, so you have to go shopping. You become, translator in chief, navigator in chief. You end up at doctor's appointments, pharmacies, trying to translate. If my grandfather's diabetic, I'm reading food labels in the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a tremendous responsibility, but I really didn't know anything else. It was like this is what I have to do. But at a young age, it really gives you a window into the sort of daily activities that families have to navigate every day.
And I wonder, as you went through that process of helping them adjust and you giving some of the pathways to adjusting, if you see your parents as consumers in the marketplace who might not have had enough information, and did that experience spark your interest in helping consumers get information they need?
I think it did. It was that, I think, that experience that somehow I realized that the marketplace is not very transparent. You're making choices, whether it's a car loan or house loan or your education, and you've got to make sense of all that. Imagine young parents trying to make sense of something like that
Right.
every day, four times. It's really, really challenging. And then what you realize, so I combine that with my parents' passion for sort of democratic values and the guarantees that, that but then, you go off to college, you learn a thing or two, and you realize that, what I realized was that you need two things, right? Those democratic values have to exist with economic opportunity and transparency in the
Right.
marketplace. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that inspired me was when I was doing research for a book I ended up writing a couple of years ago, I stumbled into this FDR quote. And it really spoke to me because it combined both of those things that I was trying to marry. And he said that, freedom isn't a half and half affair. If the average person is guaranteed equal opportunity at the polling place, they have to have equal opportunity in the marketplace. And
That's a
that was
really
like,
great point.
I just, that was like a light bulb to me. And it's been an inspiration ever since. It's like you need both of those things. And what gets in your way when that happens? You go to the polling place, we vote for state elections, but you go to the marketplace every single day, and you go there also to realize your own dreams.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to go to college, if you want to raise your family in a particular place, you've got to negotiate that. It's where you are every day. And what I also saw was that wasn't getting easier, it was getting harder for us.
Mm-hmm.
So when I thought about working at Consumer Reports at the time, I was at the Ford Foundation, and what a wonderful opportunity to be traveling around the world and finding social entrepreneurs that you can support.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But when I learned about this sort of iconic American organization, Consumer Reports, and the need for this organization to be more relevant in a
Mm-hmm.
digital world that was, putting up even more barriers and complexity for the average family, I thought, well, that's a transformation that I want to be a part of.
Right, and you were. I mean, how did you first start at Consumer Reports in terms of what kind of things did you see needed to be changed or updated? You had this new responsibility. It came out of
Yeah,
the experience of your family, and here you are. You got the power. What are you going to do?
exactly. Well, the moment I walked in the door, nobody tells you how to be a CEO. There are so many books out there. Do this, say that, and you just you have to find your way. The job sort of tells you. I remember somebody once told to me the job the leadership will reveal itself to you. I just found that to be true. But the first question I always got from the staff, this is a 600 people organization. We had 66 labs. It was a devoted staff, but they're like, okay, so what's the answer? And I was like, well, I don't have those answers in my back pocket. This is something we're going to find out together. But what I quickly learned was that the mission of the organization is still relevant. We have to ensure that the marketplace is transparent and fair and competitive for all of us to have the best possible chance of succeeding in our economic lives and in our
Mm-hmm.
family lives. And my thought was, well, the mission hasn't failed, but it's the way we execute that mission and how we reach people where they are. And where people were was shifting from bricks and mortar in a world that was hardware to a world where shopping was taking place on platforms. And so, how do we give people the tools to navigate what they can't see? It
Right,
reminded me,
exactly.
yeah, it reminded me, Bill, of sort of when we were trying to figure out, well, how do you deal with clean air? You can't
Right,
see the problem. Uh,
right.
so it was similar. Though that really inspired me. And the way I thought about it was we had had such great successes in the consumer movement with so many, agencies and standards that companies had to meet. And companies love to compete, and so you have to create standards so they compete for the best possible standards and products. I mean, competition is really healthy. But what we know now is that all those rules and standards that applied in the hardware world don't apply to the digital space. So it was the challenge and the opportunity for me was this is a new frontier. This
Mm-hmm.
is uncharted territory. It's like
Right.
what are we going to do about it? Do we actually even have the labs to test for things that we can't see? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's the thing. One of the things I'm most proud of is, you know, 12 years ago, you didn't hear a lot of talk about privacy and products and televisions and who was taking your data. So, I created an innovation lab that was strictly focused on testing those products for their privacy. So I remember the
Mm.
first one we did was smart televisions, and we all have one of those in our house.
Right.
And one of the things we didn't know at the time was that some of those televisions were actually recording what was being said and tracking what you were doing. But the moment we started rating and informing consumers, like, hey, which one should you pick if you care about this? The company started calling us. They were like,
Is that
you know,
right?
yeah, how high? So sometimes, like, look, sometimes getting a piece of legislation, as you know, can take forever. And when
Right.
and when two parties are warring factions against each other, you have to lean into the market-driven nature of our economy, which is create incentives for these companies to really meet the highest standard for people.
Yeah.
And you have to have that in your toolbox. And that was one of the things that I really enjoyed was kind of landing on those kinds of incentives, all for the good of families.
Well, so, you came in to head a major organization. Other people have done that. Other people will do that. Do you have any advice on being a leader, inspiring people, and
Yes.
perhaps on how to deal with pushback to new and much needed changes? To me, that's a big, big question.
Well, it is about the people. You can't do it yourself. You have to have people around you that are also inspirational, that are also committed to the change you're trying to seek. You have to sort of focus on what your North Star is. And to me, I've always gotten so much my own personal growth out of watching other people succeed and come up with the answers and get excited and get motivated. So building a team is exceptionally is really a key to that success. I think everybody focuses. Yeah,
Everybody following your values, but using their own creativity and energy to do so.
you have to give them the space. One of the challenges I ran into, and I guess this happens a lot in sort of knowledge spaces and science labs, is that there's so much riding on us getting the answer right.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want to disappoint the consumer when we tell them X versus Y. We don't want to get sued by a company when we get the experiment wrong. And so there was a real fear. And what we know about fear is it really constrains innovation. So people have to feel like it's okay to fail. It's okay to try some new things. That's really hard to do in a what you call a legacy brand that's been around and has
Yeah,
succeeded
forever.
for such a long time that everybody gets complacent if you've been doing it. So trying to spark that kind of safety so folks can innovate. That's I'd say that's a constant. You never quite succeed there. You make progress,
Yeah, but
but you have to keep creating that.
you were farsighted enough to see the problem and know that there had to be an answer and then take a stab at it, right?
Yeah, and one of the ways around it is okay. This lab is going to be devoted to that. This lab is
Mm.
going to be about the digital space. This lab is going to be about innovation. There is still so much we have to do in the hardware space, and as far as changing people's lives, so many of the things that one of the things I loved also about my job that was also heartbreaking was meeting some families, young families. So while we were chasing what was happening in the digital world, we were still kind of trying to keep a check. And particularly vulnerable are new couples, new families that are just starting a family.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody assumes that, hey, all the products and all the things that you shop for on a daily basis, yearly basis, they've all been tested. They've all been tested for safety. They've all been, and the reality is that's not true. And so you have some successes, and we had some successes at a great cost. We went up against some pretty big brands like Fisher Price and around what we knew was an infant sleeper that
Mm-hmm.
was causing a lot of injury to a lot of infants and more deaths than should ever be permissible.
Mm-hmm.
And we succeeded by revealing some of the data and making that connection and making it happen. And then you see how something like that bleeds into the digital space, because once we succeeded in getting an instant recall and getting those off the market, then you realize they're still being sold in the secondhand digital market. They're on those platforms. And so then you have to sit down with Facebook, you have to sit down with eBay and say,
Interesting. Yeah.
can we get a promise to, you have to, then there's the daycare centers. And so it's really remarkable. Then compare that to a digital thing like when those phones started exploding. I don't know if you remember that. People
Yeah, I
had
do.
Samsung. Well, we started reporting on that as well. And that's something in the digital space that you could turn off the functionality of that phone overnight and have an instant 100% recall. So there's a lot of good that could come also from the
Mm-hmm.
technology,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to embrace that as well. So, but it was that kind of excitement of seeing these two worlds colliding, knowing you can't keep your foot off the gas in some of the products that remain in the bricks and mortar space, but knowing that the digital space, the innovation in that space is moving so quickly. How do you keep up with the
Right.
standards and the
Right.
rules? That's the biggest challenge, I think, for our generation.
There's more of my conversation with Dr. Marta Tellado, plus searching for hours, helping out a stranger.
It could be your wife, my wife. It could be anybody. I've tried to put myself in their position and see how they feel. And to walk away with something lost, with that kind of a sinking feeling, I don't like that. I like seeing people with a big old smile on their face when they leave here.
That's coming up next. You're listening to American Voices on Sirius XM. I'm Bill Bradley. Stay with us. I'm Bill Bradley. We're back now on American Voices on Sirius XM. We're continuing my conversation with Dr. Marta Tellado. She's the former president and CEO of Consumer Reports. She once worked in my Senate office, and she's recently been appointed as senior trustee at Yale University. So, Dr. Tellado, are there more specific moments that made you proud of how you and your team helped consumers in the marketplace?
Well, think of an innovation that was such a cool idea. Think of an app. And I know a lot of your listeners are really familiar with this because it's a terrific app. It's called GoodRx.
Mm-hmm.
And what GoodRx does is you go to your app, you tell them what your prescription is, and it tells you where to go to get the best price in your radius.
Mm-hmm. Is that right?
It's amazing. So it's very popular, as you might imagine. But what we found out in our investigation was that GoodRx was making your prescriptions available to Facebook, and it was selling some of that data. Oh my goodness. Okay, well that crosses so many lines. One of our most personal aspects to your own life, and there you have like big privacy red line. But the good news there is we called them up and talked to them. We succeeded in getting them to stop it. We succeeded in Facebook also agreeing, Meta, to agree with that. And not only that, but they ended up creating a whole new position, vice president on privacy. And, so to me, that was a huge success. Yeah. That was a way of embracing the technology and working with companies in the absence of any kind of standard or regulations or rules to do the right thing. And I think what that also demonstrates is that you can have innovation and it can put people first. You don't need to make that trade-off. It can happen.
Yeah. Also, it strikes me as saying that if you have done your research and you knew what the facts are and you see that the companies are not doing what they should be doing, there are more ways to solve this problem than simply confrontation. I mean,
that's exactly right.
If you're confronting them, you're assuming they don't want to do it. And maybe they haven't thought of it or 100 other reasons. So you call them up and make the case as you effectively did, and they change. Now that's a win-win for everybody.
And that's kind of a new strategy because, in the old days, it's sort of it was very much of like name and shame. Yeah. So you wait for that product to hit the shelf. You wait for the innovation to happen. You review it, and then it's like, oh, that stinks. You get a bad grade. And by that time, they're already on the second generation or third generation of that product. And so one of the other big things that I thought I was really proud of, and then I'll get to that other question is what stands in your way if you're making all this change, is you have to go upstream. Like we have, if you have all this data about what consumers love and like and appreciate, then that's the kind of data a terrific company wants to have their hands on. Mm-hmm. So how do you sit down with companies and help them create smarter, safer, consumer-first products that get them in the sweet spot of super product, super competitive, and really hits the mark with consumers? And so we created this whole new relationship that was exactly about that. Is how do you create partnerships and how do you use that data for good? And I think data is not just something to be sold to advertisers. Data is also something to be looked at and decide how can you make something better that puts actually the real concerns of people front and center. And I think companies get that. They want consumers to know that they're meeting the mark.
Right, and that they care about them.
Exactly. Yeah. So it is, like you said, it's a win-win.
So, now you've had this incredible career and you've built this great organization, reinvigorated it, and now you're a senior trustee at Yale University. You attended Yale. I
I
remember.
did.
What does it mean to you to come back to be a
Wow.
trustee at this university?
I'm still processing that, but I will say that it was time to move on. And I was also ready for other things. And getting to Yale, I personally experienced how life-changing higher education can be. I'm a first gen, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a first gen in so many ways. And I thought I wanted to be a college professor when I was younger. And so that's when I applied to Yale to get a PhD in political science.
Mm-hmm.
And I had
Then you
worked in
got
Washington.
sidetracked into politics in
I
Washington
did.
with this
There was
guy.
somebody, this guy, this tall guy who used to run around in short pants. I got sidetracked and didn't regret it for New York Minute. But there it is. I got into Yale. I applied. I got there. Even during my PhD, I was also taking jaunts and doing other things and going to Washington. But I have to tell you the story of getting into Yale. I get to Yale and they tell me I got in, but my financial aid package hadn't been decided upon yet, but the classes were starting. So, I channeled my parents and I packed up the little I had. And a friend of mine drove me to New Haven and I found an apartment to live in. I had just enough money for maybe 2 months' rent. And I
Hmm.
left and I went. I had no idea what was going to happen. I did not have the resources to be there, but I thought, oh my goodness, this is Yale. I have to get in this car and I have to go there.
And they came
So,
through.
and they did. I had a terrific mentor. I sat down with him one day in the cafeteria and I was like, so here it is. The clock is ticking. And it came together. And it has been what a journey. So when I got called to be asked if I was interested in getting more involved in the university, I did that. I was on the university council, and it's just been really a remarkable journey to come back around, and now to be a senior trustee at a time I think where there's so much focus in higher education and how important it is and how valuable it is for innovation for our
Right.
society. I just feel like I'm in the right place at the right time to give back to something that just really changed my life.
And I hear you're at a point in your life where your schedule has changed somewhat. Can
Yes.
you tell me about new interests you picked up, new hobbies? Because I know you're not going to stop.
You're right. I can't sit still, but I've grown mostly up in cities, Newark, New Jersey, New York City, and Washington, D.C. And for the last 10 years, and now I get to spend more time here, I've been up in the Catskills. And if anyone had told me that I was going to really start enjoying the outdoors, so we're on about 17 acres as I'm sitting here talking to you, Bill. Around me is a forest of hemlocks and white pines and hardwoods. And I have learned so much about these trees, about walking in the woods. I I am all about what's happening in the woods. I listen intently. I've become so curious about the birds and what's out there. I feel like now that I'm here, I have to be a good steward of these trees. So I've been learning about invasive species. I can identify what's going on by just looking at the bark, and that has been incredible. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and they said, well, Marta, what you're experiencing is something called forest bathing. And it's a Japanese sort of
Yeah, of course.
tradition that's called, and I'm not going to pronounce this right, but Shinryu Nyoku. And what that
Mm-hmm.
means is it's the act of spending time in a forest to relax, to listen. And I don't know that was something I did a whole lot of. I was a good listener, but not in the way that being in a forest does.
Well,
And
but as Van Morrison says, wonders all around us, never far away, right? Right before your eyes every single day.
Wonders all around us, and life is all we've got. If you wait for mountains, then you're gonna miss a lot.
yeah, that's the first thing I do. I have my cup of coffee. David and I sit by the window and we look outside. And then at night we do something different. We go to the music room.
But Marta, I also hear that you've taken up the bass guitar, right?
I have. I had. It's one. There's a Fender P bass right behind me. I don't even know if I can call myself an amateur, but you know what? I'm having fun with it, and I really enjoy it. And it takes it's like meditating. You really, if you're not very good, you really have to focus on what you're doing. And I've really
So,
been enjoying that. So
tell me
David,
about it.
he's amazing, a musician. He's been a great teacher, but it's we have fun. We have a lot of fun with music. I really, it's something that's been a constant my whole life. And while I'm just mediocre at best, I enjoy it.
But isn't it wonderful discovering new interests, new things that bring you joy? I mean,
I love it.
that's
I love it.
ultimately just another Van Morrison song just written, Down to Joy, you know? He's
Yes, and it's one of the things too. It's also about allowing yourself to take some risks and try some things. When we were thinking about this place in the Catskills, I was not really for it, and David convinced me that nope, nope, this is good. And there's a little dammed stream that's formed a lake down the road, and
mhm.
I've even learned about how to tend to the invasive species in the lake. And I go out there with my, binoculars and I look around. And it's really amazing. I think I know I'm in a new chapter, but it's really surprising me and I'm really enjoying it.
That's great. Listen, Marta, Dr. Tellado, thank you so much for being here on American Voices and telling us about this amazing American career you've had. And on a personal level, it's been just wonderful watching you succeed so often over so many years as someone who knew that talent early on.
Well, you sure did. And I am forever grateful for your friendship and your mentorship, Bill. It was a delight to talk with you today.
I've been speaking with Dr. Marta Tellado. She is the former president and CEO of Consumer Reports and recently appointed as senior trustee at Yale University. To find out more, visit us on Facebook. Our Facebook page is American Voices with Senator Bill Bradley. On Instagram, it's Bill Bradley on SiriusXM.
You can ask about it, but nobody knows the way. No breadcrumb trail to follow through your days. It takes an axe sometimes, a feather in the sunshine and bad weather. It's a matter of getting deeper in any way you can. All this beauty, you might have to close your eyes and slowly open wide.
Thank you for listening to American Voices here on my YouTube channel. For more interviews celebrating the goodness and creativity of the American people, click the subscribe button below.